If you mention the town of Elk River to any rail fan in the state of Minnesota, they'll more likely than not picture this: the BNSF Staples subdivision, the longest and busiest rail line in the state of Minnesota, thriving with fast freight trains all day and all night, such as the one directly behind me. But what most probably don't know is that Elk River had another, much shorter, much slower railroad. This all started one cold morning on the school bus in late 2022 or early 2023 when I noticed this oddly straight clearing in the trees between the Vision Transportation school bus lot and Timron Precision Gear Machine Shop. Normal people would think nothing of it and move on with their day, but I am not a normal person, so I immediately got to researching what I had seen as soon as I stepped foot into school. I started with Google Maps, looking at the spot I had seen in person, and sure enough, it makes a beeline straight for the BNSF Staples subdivision. I then went to vintageaerial.com looking for single frames of railroad tracks. I found the usual stuff: houses, farms, and local businesses. I indeed did find railroad tracks, but it was this somewhat overgrown single-track line. And it wasn't the only image. I found at least 5 pictures of single-track lines in the Sherburne County area. When I found them, I was incredibly confused until I saw this picture. It appears to depict a switch from my all-too-familiar Staples sub onto the single-track line, which I would later find out is the Elk River to Milaca branch. Next stop is the now unfortunately unusable railroadpicturearchives.net. Fortunately for you and for me, I was able to snag 4 very important pictures before the site went bust. These pictures are from a train trip a man by the name of Mike Cunningham had took in 1968, and one of them also shows the switch. I am now standing roughly where the switch would have been. In March of 1886, the owner of the St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Manitoba Railway, James J. Hill, the big man himself, had raised $50,000 from local investors. That is roughly about $1.6 million in 2024 USD. The reason why he did this is because he wanted to build a railroad connecting the towns of Elk River, Princeton, and Milaca. Construction began in Elk River on October 24, 1886. And construction was finished in Milaca in November 29th of the same year. That is an impressive feat. I'm now back where this all began, the clearing between Vision Transportation and Timron Precision Gear. After the Elk River to Milaca Branchline was finished, an effect was almost immediately felt. New settlements were established, such as Pease in 1894, Long Siding in 1903, Zimmerman in 1910, and the now long-abandoned Brickton, Minnesota in 1889. I may have noticed this first, but the biggest preserved piece is right across the road. In 1889, all of the railroads James J. Hill had owned up to that point were all merged into the Great Northern Railway. This trail is called the Great Northern Trail. How it got that name is rather self-explanatory. About an 8.5-mile long section of the old roadbed was paved over after it was tore up and abandoned sometime in the late 70s and early 80s. Am I upset that there aren't any tracks here anymore? A little. But you gotta be thankful for what others can give in life. However, that does not mean there aren't any tracks left at all. This is the Great Northern Depot in Princeton, Minnesota. Just 675 feet of the original 30-mile route are left right here. For those who are wondering, no, this is not the original building. The original wooden building from 1886 was declared too small and moved off-site in 1902. Construction on this brick building, meant to replace it, started in 1902, but it wasn't finished until 1903. So it's still been around for majority of the line's existence. Trouble began as early as 1930 when the U.S. Postal Service and Great Northern decided to stop shipping the mail on the line via the railroad. And in 1952, passenger service was discontinued altogether. The station, along with this entire line, would have also witnessed the transition from seemingly alive, hissing, whistling, chugging steam locomotives to the equally awesome era of two-stroke roots-blown EMD. Listen to that EMD roots-blown power. Four-stroke turbocharged Alco, and to a much lesser extent, Fairbanks Morse-opposed piston diesel locomotives. What this station did for the next 25 years is relatively unknown. It either sat abandoned or was used as a small office and storage building, which I believe is more plausible, as it is seen in those 1968 photographs I'd mentioned earlier, and it is still in relatively decent shape despite not seeing a single passenger in over a decade and a half. In 1977, this building was put on the National Registry of Historic Places. It then sat for another 33 years until finally being restored by the city of Princeton in 2010. Today it is a small museum with a couple pieces of rolling stock sitting outside that is home to the Mille Lacs County Historical Society. It's only open 8 hours per week, so gotta clear your calendars. Even me with my relatively clear schedule had to be strategic on when I had to be here. As I am nearing the end of the story and at the physical end of the line, I am now at my last attraction, the Milaca Depot Florist. As the name implies, this business was at one point a Great Northern Railroad depot. I initially thought the Staggers Rail Act of 1980 is what would have spelled the end for the Elk River to Milaca Branchline, when the railroad companies had gained a lot of freedom over the U.S. government and decided to shut down all of their unprofitable rail lines. But the true truth is a bit more complicated than that. Being firmly in beef, dairy, and crop farming territory, there always was a plentiful supply of freight customers along the entire route. Under the Great Northern, local freight service was still able to make just enough money to hang on by a thread throughout the 50s and 60s. But the dawn of the 1970s brought a big problem. The Great Northern, along with all other railroads under the former James J. Hill umbrella, had merged together to create the Burlington Northern Railroad in 1970. The Great Northern was a big railroad, even by modern-day standards, but the Burlington Northern was one of the first of the truly enormous Class I railroad companies of today. Under the new, much bigger company, the money that the line made was so insignificant or non-existent, and the physical infrastructure becomes so decrepit that the Burlington Northern and the Interstate Commerce Commission, a U.S. government organization, had both agreed that it would be best to start phasing out the Elk River to Milaca Branchline. And so, service between Milaca and Princeton was discontinued sometime in 1972 or 1973, and the very last train ran between Elk River to Princeton and back in 1976. Just like how this florist shop was once a depot, the Elk River to Milaca branch line is now just a distant memory of longtime Sherburne and Mille Lacs County residents. As always, if I got something wrong and you know better, please let me know. I am always open to corrections. Anyways, if you like this video, subscribe and clang that bell on your way out for more railroading, tractors, and NASCAR content. Alright, so I couldn't put this in the regular video because that would ruin the ebb and flow, but I really couldn't not talk about this. So, this is a portable depot, so anybody who's gone to public school in America that will probably know what I'm talking about. But do you know those temporary classrooms? Those temporary classrooms that weren't really temporary, ended up being there for years? That's essentially what this is. It would be brought in on a flat car, picked up by a crane, set down somewhere trackside, and then that would just be the town's depot until a permanent structure could be built. And since long siding never really grew, this is just their depot for the rest of the time. Precision gear. My memory. I wrote this like almost a month ago, and I've already forgotten the damn lines. Great. I wish I had a script. I wish I had a physical script that I can grab with my fingers and my hands. After the Elk River to himself. All right, I gotta redo that. Come on. You can do this, man. and the now long abandoned Brickton, Minnesota in 1890. New towns such as Pease in 19 would have been. Thanks for distracting me, Camry. Me. All right, need to start over. Wait for all these cars to go away. Who started up a leaf blower? Is he gonna roll coal on me? No, he's not. All right, good. Okay, maybe not.
Some actual Brickton bricks, that's funny. Look at that, it's cool.
Finally, I cooked.